In order to actually play a piece with freedom and fluidity, you have to be able to read music pretty quickly. You have to move beyond those notes to the expression and the dynamics. But as long as you're stuck reading music slowly, that's not going to be able to happen. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to give you 5 tips to be able to read music so much faster. If you watch this entire video and implement these 5 tips today, in just a few weeks, you are going to be significantly faster at reading music. And make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video because I'm also going to give you a bonus tip that you don't want to miss out on. So the first tip is to think of reading music like learning how to read in the English language. It's all about patterns. You can think of note names like letters. You want to make sure that you know all of your letters, right? You have to know your letters before you can read words. And the same is true in music. You have to know those note names and you have to be pretty quick with those note names. Another pattern would be intervals. Intervals are like short little sight words in the English language, like the or she or he. And then we have chords, which are more complex words, and scales, which would be maybe like an entire sentence. And if you want to be able to open up a novel and read it and comprehend it, you have to be able to recognize these patterns and you have to know them fairly well. So the second tip is to memorize these patterns like your life depends on it. I want you to pick one pattern per day. That could be one note, it could be one interval, one chord, or one scale. And you are going to memorize it. Forwards, backwards. You're going to memorize what it looks like on a piece of paper, and you're going to memorize how it feels to play it on the piano. Now, if you were to pick one pattern per day and really fully memorize it, in just a few weeks, you would know so many more patterns and you would be well on your way to mastering all of the musical patterns and to be able to read music with speed and fluidity. Now, the third tip is to always be recognizing these patterns in music. So whenever you open up a piece of music, you're not just going to dive in and start playing. You are going to look through the music and look for these patterns because you're taking the time to become familiar with them. You're taking the time to memorize them. And so now write them in your music. Make them jump out on the page. And when you start to do this, you get to the point that you realize that most pieces are just filled with various patterns. There's not really random things that happen in music. It's all variations on these patterns. Now, I actually recommend that you write them in your music. So let's say that day one, you decide that you're going to memorize a C chord. So the notes of a C chord are C, E, and G. And that means that when you go to play your pieces of music, you are going to, maybe with a red highlighter or a little sticker of a star, you're going to find all of the examples of a C chord in your piece of music, and you are going to highlight them in red or put a little star sticker next to them so they jump out at you and so that you see them every single time you play. Because it's one thing to memorize the notes of a C chord and to be able to say what the notes of the C chord are, but it's another thing to be able to actually find it in a piece of music. And when you can find the patterns in a piece of music, that's where it starts to become very, very helpful. And that's when you start to get way faster at reading music. Now, the fourth tip is to always scan through your piece before you start to play. I even like to set a timer for this for like 5 minutes and pretend like I'm a detective. And you are looking for not only the patterns that you have spent time learning and becoming very quick at recognizing, you're also looking for things like dynamics, you're also looking for things like hand position changes or finger changes that are going to be a little bit complicated, accidentals, anything in the music that gives you a clue as to how it's supposed to be played and to give you a little bit of context before you put your hands on the keys. When people are feeling like it's really slow for them to read music, it's because there's not a clear enough signal between the brain and the hands. And so taking a minute to look through your piece before you start to play helps you to be able to give clear signals to your hand. Tip number 5 that you definitely don't want to skip is to do the rhythm first. This is something that 99% of adult piano players skip and don't pay attention to, and it's a huge mistake. Make sure that in the very beginning stages of learning a piece or sight reading a piece, you do the rhythm. You write the counting in, you clap and count out loud, you pay attention to the rhythm as you're laying the foundation of the piece so that you don't get to a point much later in the learning process where you have to go back and figure out the rhythm or correct all of the rhythmic errors that you've been making. I have a lot of videos on this and I'll link to some of them in the description below. If you're not comfortable with the metronome, if you're not comfortable counting out loud, change that now and start to get comfortable because it makes a huge difference in being able to read music faster. If you're not paying attention to rhythm, you're really just trying to pick notes out of thin air. The rhythm gives your brain a structure of where those notes go in relation to each other. And it's really, really, really important in being able to read with speed. All right, so your bonus tip is to practice sight reading every single day. And sight reading is different than learning complicated pieces. And if you want to know more about how to practice sight reading so that you can increase your speed of reading music, check out this video that I did that includes the 3 secrets that you need to know in order to master sight reading. And you can do that right